Hello and welcome for another quiz in video. Today I would like to talk about c-betting strategy in heads-up pot and more especially how to play with flush draws. So we are not going to stick to this basic example but play around a bit with PokerSnowie to see what to do in various spots. You probably all heard about this match between Der and Jungleman, which was stopped by Black Friday a few years ago, but they are already play 20,000 hands, so some experts analyzes the match and the way both players had played it. And one of the biggest surprise was that Der was having a very low c-bet frequency in single raise pot. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but it was something very low, just above 20%. Some of you might think, okay, we all know that Der was crushed in that match, so that strategy had proved to be wrong, but actually there were very little difference in the results in single raise pot. The big difference, the big swing in the match occurred in 3-bet pots. So back in the days, it was before PokerSnowie, I tried to understand why he was implementing such a strategy, and actually it makes sense. In a heads-up match, we want to open from the bottom with a very wide range. Snowie would open with something like 90% here. So with such a wide range, we wanted often a hand which is strong enough to be bet on 3 streets, even if Villain has also a wide defending range. And more importantly, we will have a lot of hands in our range which are just strong enough to be used as a bluff catcher or maybe value bet only on 1 street. For example, bottom pair or king high on that flop, or a hand which has some equity. For example, on that flop with Jack 10 of spades, we can improve to second pair, which is quite a good hand in heads up, by hitting a Jack or a 10, or even sometimes when the pot is checked down just to win with Jack high. So, since most of our hands are doing better by being checked and play a 2 streets game, we want to check a lot of the time. And of course, we also want to be balanced. For example, top pair is always a hand strong enough to be bet in heads up, but we cannot always bet top pair, otherwise, when we check, we would say to our opponent, hey, I didn't bet, I don't have top pair, which is a wrong strategy. And this will increase a bit more our checking frequency. So if we can go along with high c-bet frequency against weak opponents, against a strong opposition, like Der was facing against Jungleman, someone who knows when to check raise and when to float out of position, Tom Dwan's strategy might be the best. I had this in mind when Snowie was released. So I checked a lot of decisions of Der not to c-bet, and actually he was sometimes wrong, but rarely by a lot. Of course, there were probably some exploitative strategy due to the dynamic of the match that I'm not aware of. I don't know what is on average PokerSnowie c-bet frequency in a single raise pot in a heads-up match, but my guess will be something between 30 and 40%, no more. That means that the strategy of Der was probably overcautious and we should be a bit more aggressive, but not by a lot. Anyway, that was a very long introduction, so let's move to the examples. I pick up situations where we have draws. Since draws are interesting hands, they are not value bet hands, and they are not pure bluff either, so it's not always easy to know when to bet and when to check with a draw. So in the first example, we have a pretty good flop for a range. And indeed, PokerSnowie advises to c-bet for half pot and with a frequency of 72%. This is actually a very good situation to bet with a flush draw, and indeed we should bet on that flop. The reason is that most of our value bet range here are hands including an ace. So if we are lucky enough and club it on the turn or the river, an aggressive villain might try to represent a flush in order to make us fold our top pair. And since there are already 4 clubs dead, 2 in our hands and 2 on the board, it's very unlikely that villain has a flush draw himself. So in a vacuum, it's probably always plus EV to bet with a flush draw. But we want to be balanced, and we have to check some of the flush draws. We are checking 28% of the hands. That's a lot, so we have also to protect our checking range. And we cannot tell our opponent that when we check, we don't have a flush draw, and let him put us under pressure if club come on the turn or on the river. In order to see what kind of flush draw Snowie would like us to check, we can use the range advice tool in here, and we order the cards by draw type. So Snowie will check with king high flush draw, mostly some queen high flush draw. Once we order here in a specific order, can be like by combination or by a draw type, then we will have in the second column the same order. So for example, if I choose another order, so that's pretty good, I think, since here we cannot select the flush draws. So yeah, we will have to check mostly our best king high flush draw, and that makes sense since those hands are strong enough to bluff catch on the turn, whatever the turn is. They can improve in the second pair, or once again, king high flush draw can also win with ace king high on the river at showdown. Let's see now a flop slightly worse for a range. We put a king instead of the ace, and it's still a c-bet with queen high flush draw, and in the same way, Snowie would rather check his ace high flush draw and some of his pretty weak flush draw, but I think this is marginal, and this is more to balance very precisely his betting range, but against most of human we don't need to be so balanced, and best is just to check when we are confident enough that we can bluff catch on the turn. Not that Snowie would not check his pair plus flush draw hands like 7 deuce or 3-2 of clubs. They are just too strong to not be in our value betting range on the flop. So what to do now if the flop is bad for a range? If I trade that king for a 10, for example? According to Snowie, now we should only bet with 26% of a range. It was 72% with ace high. It was 56% with king high, and now we drop to 26% of our betting range. And actually, with flush draws, the strategy is a bit reversed. So we want now to bet with our stronger hands. Straight flush draws, of course, which are good against any hands which give us actions, and with king high, queen high, and ace high flush draws. But when we have a weak flush draw, we cannot bet anymore. And as you can see, all the pair plus flush draw are a very good candidate to be checked, since we can bluff catch on almost any turn. And this also makes sense. When we check back with pair plus flush draw on the ace 9 deuce or king 9 deuce, it's not certain that villain would try to bluff us out of the hand on the turn or the river, since they know that the flop is good for a range, and they assume that we would bet when bluffing. But when we check back on that flop, it's very likely that most of the villain will stab on the turn, and therefore we want to have those hands since they are good for bluff catching. And conversely, it's no more very easy to bluff catch with ace high or king high flush draw on many turns on such a board, and we prefer to bet with those hands. I would like to finish this video with some backdoors examples. Backdoors are also important to know when to c-bet or not c-bet. So let's see on that flop, which is bad for a range, with queen high and a backdoor flush draw, we will still be able to bet 2/3 of the time. Why, if it's the 10 of spades and we don't have any backdoor, well, we have a backdoor straight, but now we should give up most of the time. And it's the same on the favorable flop with the ace of club and the backdoor flush draw. Snowy would c-bet 100% of the time. Why, if it's the ace of spades, now it would give up 1/3 of the time. This was already a pretty long video, so I will finish it here. Please let me know if you enjoy it and if you want more content about heads up play. Good luck and see you next time.